My name is Steven Costales, and I'm the author of, this book right here. It's Wake Up the Brilliance Inside of You. And it says right down here at the bottom, it's a study course in transformational living. And I am a life transformational practitioner, which means I've worked with many, many people over 30 or 40 years, thousands of hours, to transform their life. And we do this at the Brilliant Institute, and we're about to have a video. We certainly hope that you like the video, that you get something out of the video. You'll have the opportunity to buy the book on Amazon. You'll have the opportunity to participate in some of our mastermind groups. You'll have the opportunity to invite us to speak at some of your groups, at some of your guest seminars, and we'd be glad to come out to your place of business, come out to your home, talk to your guests, and see if they would like to go through this book, the study guide course. And so we're about to have a video. We certainly hope that you enjoy the video and get a lot out of it. Thank you.
Once again, thank you, Steve, so much for coming. We're at your house right now, so thank you so much for allowing me to take some of your time to talk with you and to talk about the book that you're coming out called Wake Up the Brilliance Inside you. So the first question I want to ask is, who are you?
It's a wonderful question, and I just want to say I acknowledge you here this morning. Someone who is, quote, young. Of course, we're all ageless, so that is another illusion. But someone who's doing an inquiry. And part of the inquiry is, who are you? The question is why would I want to go through that big hassle of figuring out who I am? If you don't know who you are, plan on having a big hassle. Plan on having a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. So the very first chapter in the book is discovering who you are. That's the easy road. Now, a lot of times people say, well, I don't want to talk about who I am. That's pretty serious. No, what's serious is who you don't think you are. So most people are in a very serious, stressful mess because they don't know who you are. You want the easier road? Take the time to discover who you are. And you'll find that there's a flow that comes out of it that you never even knew was there. Who am I? Many, many years ago, I looked at it. I had to get in touch with my experience. So I defined, some 30 years ago, I am my experience of now. Now, that was a big deal. And it was very important because when you're in the now, you have to experience. You see, you can't have love 10 minutes ago, and you can't have love 10 minutes in the future. It's now. So if you don't know who you are and you don't know anything about the now, plan on a lot of suffering. And if you look around our society, most people are suffering, and particularly like yourself, who's in a, quote, younger age, suicide's gone way up because they don't know who they are. And another way of saying who you are, and this, of course, is a long conversation, perhaps could go on for hours. It would. But we'll just say it more simple. If you're not your experience of now, you're simply who you've declared yourself to be or your life purpose. Now, people don't know what it mean by declare yourself to be. I really don't know what an experience is, and I really don't know what my purpose is. Oh, this sounds really difficult. I'm telling you, this is the easy road. You don't want to spend the next 40 or 50 years not knowing who you are. That's a long, tough road, and I would plan on being very exhausted. You want to get freed up, discover who you are. And so then I would say, to define it a second way, and that is that you are your language, okay, or your meanings you've attached to language, or the emotions there. And you go, oh my gosh, that's pretty heavy, Well, in the book we get this defined down, so it's not so heavy. Well, what is language? What is emotions? What is meanings? And what is my experience? So these are often things we don't talk about because, and I'm going to be really frank, the reason we don't talk about it, we don't want people this powerful. When you know who you are and you know what your purpose is, you're outrageously powerful. And so we have sort of dumbed people down in our society. We will not talk about who we are. We will not talk about our experience. We won't examine our meanings. We won't examine the emotions we've attached to it, and we won't examine our language, and we won't declare ourselves into existence, because you get way, way too powerful. Because you begin to be more authentic in yourself, and then all of a sudden you start making perfect choices. Our society, for the most part, has taught you not to make perfect choices. We haven't been very nice to human beings. So we don't dare touch the subject matter who you are. We won't talk about what you're experiencing. We won't allow you to be in the present time and now. You will not discover your life purpose, because if you get all of that, those people who you're giving power to, you may no longer need to. You'll generate the power within you. This is not just some theory we're talking about here today. It will happen. And so in a sense, if you want me to say it a third way, I'm going to use a very fancy word, our paradigm. That's a word that drives people crazy, but it just simply means the view I'm looking through. And so I'm sort of kind of blinded because, I think I'm stupid. Well, once you can let that paradigm go, oh, I think I'm ugly. Oh, I think I'm Napoleon. Oh, I think that I'm weird. And we walk around with this on. And once we can get rid of the weirdness and the ugliness and the Napoleon, we then have massive choices. And the most important word in the dictionary, I think, is the word choice. There's another word called constructs I won't go through. But I think that's so. A lot of people, if you don't know who you aren't running your life. And if you have a $10 million in the bank and you don't know who you are, your life will be a mess. If you are a famous movie star and you don't know who you are, your life will be a mess. If you have 10 PhDs, your life will be a mess. Nothing trumps understanding your paradigm. And we don't teach that to anyone because we don't want people that powerful. You will become, what do I mean by power? Power means I said something and then it happened. And if you don't know who you are, don't plan on any power. And plan on a lot of exhaustion. So when you look at this, it's like, oh, this is pretty heavy. No, this is the easy road. And it's the easy road once you get it. For the next 40 years, you won't have to constantly be up in your head with the noises in your head being drained. And I think people don't want to be drained. And that's the road to freedom and love. So I hope that isn't too long of an answer.
No, I think that's fantastic because it really does touch. And I like that you define power as being able to speak something into existence. And that's something that every human being has the opportunity and the ability to do, but unless you really figure out who you are, there's no way you can really manifest what the miracles that are meant for you, that the universe has for you. I think that's fantastic.
And I would say something about youth. If you're in that paradigm, don't plan on any youth, because you may as well be like some old person with a cane who can't see 2 or 3 feet in front of them, because it doesn't make any difference if you're 95 and you're 20. If you're looking like this, you're flat out exhausted. And this is why the suicide rate amongst young people is way up. They're sick of this, but if they knew how wonderful they were, authentically knew how wonderful they wouldn't commit suicide. So this is what kills you, literally. And people don't realize it. If you put on your death certificate, it was my paradigm that killed me, not, some accident I got with. Now, that accident came from your paradigm. So plan on having a lot of problems in your life until you discover who you are.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And you touched upon the terms life purpose. And I know from doing some of the work in your book, you have multiple purposes that you want the people that read it to figure out for themselves. Not just their past purposes, but their present and possibly future purposes. So I wanted to ask Steven Costales, what is your life purpose?
Well, my life purpose is, and I've had it for 20 years, I had one before this, but my life purpose is I am, under all circumstances, I am, that we are the one brilliant self. Life is transformed, creating miracles and transforming humanity. So, one of the things in working with people, and I worked with a woman 40 years ago, her name was Rosa, who had a lot of difficulties. How do we get, you get an automobile, you get an owner's manual, but we don't really necessarily have an owner's manual for a human being. Here it is right here. However, this isn't necessarily owner's manual. You'll create your own owner's manual. This is going to help you to do that. This book is not about understanding. I know people go, oh, gee, it can't be about understanding. This book is not about having the truth. Oh my God, he's not going to give me the truth. Oh, this book is not about giving you some kind of belief system. Oh, this book isn't even about describing something. It's not about understanding. It's not about changing you. Really, it's not about helping you. It's not about fixing you up. Well, why would I want to read that if it's not doing that? This is about you coming from your gut so that you invent yourself. Most books are trying to tell you what to do. This isn't about religion, even though I respect it. It's not about psychology. It's not about philosophy. That's why this becomes very, very, very unusual, because this is about you discovering you. So what I discovered a long time ago, some 40 years ago, is, as we talked a little bit about being a chicken without your head on, if you don't know what your life purpose is, then somebody else made it up for you. And so probably somebody else is speaking for you. So a life purpose is different than having life goals. Goals are something that are finite. Well, that's a fancy word. It simply means it took me, I was going to buy a car. I went out and studied it. 3 months later, I bought the car. Well, that's not a purpose. That is a goal, and it's finite. It took me 6 months to get it. A purpose you can't achieve. So how do you achieve I am that we're the one brand self? Well, it's something you got to generate. Life is transformed, really, creating miracles and transforming humanity. You can't accomplish that. You can't accomplish love. It's now you generate it, now you generate it, now you generate it. So a purpose is endless, generated from moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And we start with a life purpose, and then we have many other purposes besides that.
Right, and can you touch upon what the other purposes are in the book that you talk about?
Well, we do. What I found out is when people discovered their life purpose, it wasn't enough. They'd go back into their old behaviors. So then we had to write an old life purpose, which simply said is basically what you got as a child. And that wasn't enough. So I saw people had problems with their body. So it interfered with their life purpose. So we had to have a body purpose and an old body purpose. Then I saw that they had problems spiritually. They didn't have a bigger picture, whatever spirit means for you. So I figured that they had to have a new and old spirit purpose. And I'm going, they got problems with their money. So then we had to have a money and then we had to have an education spirit and a relationship, a body, spirit, education, money, relationship, besides the life spirit. So there's 12 purposes. And if you don't have those 12 purposes, who's running your body? Who's running your money? I'm working with a client here tomorrow, almost got a PhD in finance. He has no money. I've been working with a client who's a nutritionist, 90 pounds overweight, smoking cigarettes. So you're not going to get this in a university. This woman, who was quite brilliant in nutrition, she had this run in her life, not her master's degree in nutrition. This fellow who had almost got a PhD in finance, this ran his life. So it's interesting. Your school's not going to help you. It's nice to have schooling, but until you are able to reach into your gut and create those purposes, even if you've got a lot of money, even if you're educated, none of it will work. Because ultimately it gets down to who you are as a paradigm. And if you don't know the paradigm you are, you're in trouble.
Awesome. So with you having this book to your right, what exactly does that book offer the world and offer the people?
Yeah. Well, this book, of course, I wrote it, so of course it's obviously wonderful, but the book's not about me.
Right.
So then, well, what's wonderful about it? So, and why is it any different? I mean, somebody said that after you graduate from high school, 70% of the people don't even read a book. So is this the same thing? This is drastically, drastically, drastically different. I started understanding people when I was 8 years of age. So this is 60 years every day of massive inquiry. And what I discovered is that we needed to stop learning things. We needed to stop understanding things. We needed to stop describing things. What we really needed to do was unlearn. So this book is not about learning anything. It's about unlearning. And I don't know of any book that does that. Now, what I mean is there may be books that describe that, but this is a transformational study guide so that when you get done over the end of the chapter, Start doing some work. Don't go to chapter 2. And it may take you 100 hours to answer the very first questions in the first chapter, discovering who are you. You don't just read the chapter and then go on. It's, no, stop down. Who are you? And so, and then the next question in the first chapter is, did you decide who you are? Or did somebody else? And the next question is can I be anything in my life or not? Those are 3 questions. So once you get done with chapter 1, you slow way down and start to look at that. That's where the work really happens. Not reading the chapter, go, oh, gee, I understood something. No, it gave you some ideas to do some introspection. That's why nothing like this exists. And so it sounds arrogant. It is not arrogant. It simply means is that you haven't done the inquiry in you. And this book forces you, if you want to use that, to look. You don't go to chapter number 2. So after you get done reading a chapter, and let's say the chapter took you an hour to read, now spend 100 hours. Mm-hmm. So what most people do is read a chapter and they go to the next thing. So this is massive, massive introspection. And introspections of probably letting go of something, not introspection of learning something. It's probably, this book's about letting go. This book is about disappearing. This book is about unlearning. And it's not just about understanding those things, it's actually you becoming that. And that is most profound. So why this is the most profound book in the world, I'm going to say, I'm going to answer it. Because human beings are profound. This has you get in touch with your profound. So I can actually say this is one of the most profound books written. It sounds highly arrogant, but that's because you find out how profound you are. So that is why it's a very glorious thing. And I understand why I've written it, because my whole life's been about blowing up paradigms. And most people have been about learning paradigms. So that's what I would have to, how I would describe the book.
So would you say that you have a massive amount of love for humanity and the people that are around you?
A love that you don't even work at. You see, you don't have to go around and say, "Why, gee, I love you, and I think I'm going to get to some touchy-feely." Mm-hmm. No, it's a love in which there's just no barriers. So you don't have to get out and start to get up to love. You're looking at yourself. So it's not like, oh, I love you because it's something romantic or my heart's palpitating. That's all good stuff. Not even trying to be loving. Simply means is that whatever judgments I have with you are not there. Whatever beliefs I have about you are not there. What other considerations I have about you are not there. What other, thoughts and emotions aren't there. So as I'm sitting here with you, Vincent, there's love. Not because I'm trying to love you or I have to get up to it. I'm looking at myself. So that's why this thing, love, everybody's all screwed up. When they say, I love you, be very careful. Because they don't even know anything about it. It's not until you can discover who you are and know your purposes, you probably don't know a lot about love. And that's why when people get married, they go, where did all the love go? All the love went because now I never did clear my paradigm. And now I'm running my number on you and trying to change you and trying to fix you. And we hate each other. When if all of that was gone, such as with my own wife after 25 years, it's pretty inspiring. But that's just because we don't have the paradigm between us. So that's why we have a relationship purpose. And if you don't understand that, don't plan on any relationships. And most people don't have a single friend, and even their own spouse is not their friend, because we've got these barriers. And women usually are a lot more smarter than men, and they understand this. And so they're just so tired of this. This is why we got to get divorced. Because there's something ugly between us. Well, it's barriers. Could we let those barriers go? And then all of a sudden it's most profound and most exciting. And that's why we have a whole chapter on relationships and creating your relationship purpose.
That's fantastic.
Are these questions I'm asking a little too long, or you want them a little shorter?
No, this is just fine.
Yeah.
If people want to watch the whole thing, then that's fantastic. I know I would. Brad sends videos of 3-hour, 4-hour long inquiries and interviews and stuff like that. So this is why we're doing this, is to really get an inside look at who you are, why you wrote the book, and what the book has to offer. So you have massive amounts of knowledge, and I do want to ask if you can make a definition for the word love for you in maybe 5 to 10 words.
Well, let's just say I love you because you got blonde hair. That doesn't mean I love you. Mm-hmm. If you have a because there, you probably don't love it. So if that's the short of it, get rid of all your reasons why you love somebody, and then you probably love them. There's your 10 words.
That's fantastic.
And if you want short answers, I can give you very short.
No, well, I'm not going to try and stop. I'm
Yeah.
not going to take
Yeah.
who you are and
Yeah.
the passion that you have with your answers. Take them away from you. I check here just to make sure it stays recording, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that answers what does the word love to you mean to you. So what was your life growing up? You mentioned that you've been doing this life inquiry for 60 years. Growing up, you stated at 8 years old, you started to really notice people and really think and think about people and their actions. So, as a young Steven Costales, where did it all start, and why do you believe it started?
Yeah. Well, I'll also say, according to the, I'm 68, but once you understand that age is not even real, so that's a whole nother conversation. Well, it all happened with my mother, who was really from a little town called La Payne, Texas. You talk a little bit like this. And she didn't have any school there. And the justice of peace came out to her father and made him the sheriff. So she didn't know anything about any rules. And her own mother died in her own arms. And so my mother came out, made her own rules, which is ultimately what we're talking about here, is create from within. And she came from compassion. So my mother was wild, but she got away with anything. And she invented from within herself, and I mean every day. I mean, my mother was wild, and yet the most compassionate woman you never meet. So that began my thinking, all rules, in a sense, you don't need to follow them. Now, you have to be very careful of teaching a kid that. That's not necessarily a good thing. And also coming from compassion. I'll just give you a quick story about my mother. I was kind of, when I was 21, big shot, and I had everything. And a fellow came to the door who was, kind of a hobo or poor. And I shut the door immediately. I went over to my mother. I said, oh my gosh, this guy Charlie's at the door. She says, is that right? She says, open the door. I go, no, he looks like a mess. She says, you open the door and open the door now. So I opened the door of this guy, and she saw him and opened up her arms, gave him dinner and everything else. And when we got done, my mother came up and grabbed me by the shirt. And she said, you ever treat another human being like that, and I will bust your nose. So my mother did this all the time. So that began to change my reality. Now, my father also played a little game with me called the guessing game. And this I became obsessed with. He says, now tell me about this person. And I would describe him. He says, well, tell me more about him and tell me more about him. We did this every day. So at 8 years of age, I became obsessed with understanding people. So with those two paradigms being totally broken open, it changes a kid's life. So when I got into high school, I would do something that none of the other kids were doing. I'd go, can I help you solve some of your problems? And nobody was doing that in high school. This is the last thing you want to talk about.
Right.
And you might say to me in high school, well, my parents are getting divorced because of me. I go, oh, no. Your parents had their own problems, and so they all called me counselor. So this began an extreme, I'm talking about an obsession. And people ask me, what are you thinking about? Why are you, and I'm trying to figure out why you have that smile or why you said that. So it became almost like a heroin addiction as a kid. So that's what really began it all, a long, long time ago.
And it's just stayed consistent throughout your 60 years from when you started. So do you feel like every person you come into contact with, you're doing an inquiry right from the first hello?
It sounds a little bit arrogant, but I usually know much, much more about people than they know about themselves because they haven't looked. Because all you got to do is look at their paradigm, and you can predict what they're going to do. It sounds almost like voodoo. It's not. It's actually very clear. If you have a view that you're stupid, I can tell you what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. If you have a view that you're ugly, I can tell you what you're going to do. So it's very different in listening to that. And so then you have, and then of course after I got out of high school, I started doing massive work. Went on from there.
Excellent. So kind of staying with you and your upbringing, who have been some of your biggest influences throughout your life?
Well, I've had many, many of them, but one of the things I did is a thing called the S training, which was like weird. It wasn't, of course. because when I did the S training, something was put on by Werner Erhard, which I don't think he knew a lot about transformation, but he knew a lot about organizations. I had to get in touch with my experience, which I wasn't. So when I came out of that training, I began to realize that I was up in my head. So I went and did courses with one company for 3 years. I went to another company called LifeSpring and did courses for 3 years. I went to another company called Summit and did for 3 years. I did a lot of work at Sterling Institute. I did a lot of work at the Omega Institute. Did a lot of work at the Symington and the Owens. I did all kinds of transcendental entities, meditation, did massive amount of mastermind groups, became a suicide hotline counselor, spent years studying hypnotherapy. I mean, a massive inquiry. Besides, that was after the 7 years I spent in a university getting a social science degree. So I've been in a major inquiry, and people have begged me to write a book, which I didn't ever want to do because it was hard enough for me to speak this, and then you're going to write it? Mm-hmm. This is 6.5 years at about 35 hours a week to put this together. But I know the difference it makes because I know where people are at, and I know why they get depressed, and I know why they commit suicide, and there's usually nothing wrong with them. But they've gotten up into this, and they bought it. And this is why most people kill themselves. And if they knew this was an illusion, and if they knew how to get rid of it, then a whole new world. There's a world out there that people don't see. This is preventing them from seeing that, and I won't put up with it. So that's why I've gone through this long journey.
That's good. So going through all of these institutions, has there been anyone like specifically, like some people would say, like Buddha has influenced them, or a certain professor? Has there been a specific person in your life that has really that helped elevate you to be who you are today?
As odd as this may sound, I don't think you want that. Now I know that's going to be sound. I think you want to find out the professor that's within you.
Okay.
See, this is very different. It's like this book is not about me. It's about you discovering you. So it's time for you to become your own professor. It's time for you to become your own minister. Mm-hmm. It's time for you. So if you're talking about out here, they had me do an inquiry. Great, but I'm not interested in what's out here. In my book, it's kind of an odd thing. It's like, oh, well, maybe somebody will go tell me something. Well, no, I want you to tell yourself something. So that's why that's an odd question. We're looking for these mentors, or we're looking for these great people. I would say those great people, and I can mention some, are ones that had you look inside. Mm-hmm. But not too many of them are. They're trying to give you something from the outside, and aren't they wonderful? But, you left the university and you got all kinds of things, but you still left with the same paradigm. So those people who are great, who would actually have you then complete that paradigm, is the important part. And that's usually yourself working on yourself. So if somebody's empowering you to examine yourself and move away from it, that's your mentor. So you really want to be your own mentor. But mentor from your higher self. So I know that's an odd question. Now, there's certainly Gandhi that's great. Mother Teresa's great. Somebody at a very young age, people who don't like, was Richard Nixon, but he taught me a lot of lessons back then. Certainly Werner Erhard, John Hanley. I mean, I could go on a whole list. You can read books by Eckhart Tolle. You can take a look at Abraham Lincoln, people who, the Constitution of the United States, Oprah, Serena. I mean, there's so many that, but what they've done is they've shown greatness. But I don't get to be great. Mm-hmm. See, and so you look at somebody like Serena Williams, who's incredible. She gets to be great, but maybe I don't get to be a great tennis player. So I'm interested in you becoming a great tennis player. So I don't want Serena, who's wonderful, and we probably could learn a lot of lessons from, or Oprah, we could learn a lot of lessons from, but I want the people to become the Oprah that's in them. So this is very different. So right. I don't want all these, they may be showing great things, but I never get to be it. This is about you being it.
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that, and it's acknowledging someone and their position in life, if there is a position in life that people can get. But how you're saying they're not, some of them do help out in their community, and some of them do help people try in certain living situations. but they're not really helping themselves, or not themselves, but helping the people around them really become that greatness. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yes. So we'd take Nixon, I'd take him off the pedestal, I'd take Clinton off the pedestal, I'd take Obama off the pedestal, I'd take Bush off the pedestal, and I'd take Trump off the pedestal. Because I don't know what good that's going to do us. I mean, they're going to, and then you become the president. The president of your purpose. So this is what this is a lot about. This isn't about glorifying me. So this is a very different way to look at it, because
Right.
when you have all these people up on pedestals, where are you at? You're down here. So a lot of these people, movie stars, presidents, all of them, I don't care, Republican, Democrat, knock them off the pedestal.
That's fantastic. And that brings me to my next question, because you recently did a kind of social experiment with the Jubilee group on YouTube. And it was the episode of meeting the middle ground between the rich and poor people, and how they seek to understand each other. I wanted to ask, what was that experience like, and what did you take away from that?
Well, the question is, what is rich? See, well, we know what rich is. Well, you know, I may be sitting here with $2, $5, $10 million, but I'm miserable. Well, you're probably pretty poor. So I'm suggesting to you, unless you know your purposes in that, you probably are pretty poor. Now, it depends upon, you know, the purpose of having money is supposedly leading to some kind of well-being. It's supposedly to leading to some kind of freedom or ease. But if I got a paradigm over here, I'm not there. I'm exhausted. So if wealth means freedom within, if it means peace within and love, and you got a 2 or 3 million in the bank, you're a loser. Now, it's good to have 2 or 3 million in the bank because you can use it,
Right.
but not with this. I mean, you know, and so you'll find some of the people who are, quote, poor, totally extraordinary. So you have to define what poor is, but the purpose of money is to lead to well-being, is to lead to ease, it's to lead to sort of taking care of yourself, but you're going to wind up killing yourself in your paradigm. And most people do. We just saw this with Robin Williams, who, one of the best actors, very compassionate, but behind the scene he was lonely and a drug addict. That's because he had this. Where was Whitney Houston at? Where was Michael Jackson at? These are the people that had all those things, but I'm suggesting to you they had this. So the question is, you know, and so when we got to Jubilee, and that is like, we didn't get much a chance to go into that, but you do want to handle your money. It's important, and it means a lot, because we have these physical things, and they allow for certain things. So, you know, if you have a cup, you know, you don't want to drink out of your hand. So the cup actually gives you something. So you don't want to fool around with the physical universe. So I would suggest to you that part of being wealthy is have a physical universe that supports you. And that's a whole other conversation. So out of Jubilee, it was really great, because I think what they got in that video is that, am I really poor or wealthy?
Right.
What? You know, and it's kind of like, you know, and so I think one wants to look at, yes, we want a physical universe and we want it to empower us. Don't mess with it. So if you need 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, get it to have the physical universe work. So whatever that means, and if you mess with your physical universe, it will crash on you. And that's a long conversation. And then there's just the whole part of, well, you know, if I had a lot of money, could I maybe write a book like this? That's the person you want to have a lot of money. So, you know, when I look at something like this, which gives people the right to get wealthy, I don't just mean financially wealthy, because wealthy is ease within you. And if they've got this exhaustion, you might be surprised that a lot of the successful people are in serious trouble. And we don't know that because they hide behind a persona. But most of the professionals, a lot of them you're going to find that are wealthy are addicted. And you might be surprised. You know, when you look at the suicide rate, you might be odd, but the highest suicide rate is between 60 and 65 white men. I wonder why.
Right.
So you got to be very careful of, a lot of things that appear that way. You know, we say it's a man's world, but 90% of the people in jail are men, and 80% of the men in nut are men. And those that are addicted are men. They commit suicide 3 times as much. They live 5 years less. I wonder if something happened to men. Now, women have been treated very well either. But once you look at a man's life, it's not pretty. So there's a lot of personas about I'm wealthy and everything else. How are we going to define wealth? And so I'm basing it on 2 levels. Have your physical environment support you, get the necessary money, and at the same time, make sure that you are free within. Otherwise, you won't get what your money is going to offer you.
And it ends up controlling you, which is terrible. And that's how people, again, kind of fall off, commit suicide, get into debt. Some of the worst things that could happen to a human being. I want to ask you if you can go into what it was like to work with the suicide hotline. What was that experience like for you? And what do you feel that you gave in those situations?
Well, something was said to me making a difference. It's like, what's that? I mean, I really didn't know what making a difference was. You know, I had my own corporation, and so I was in a mastermind group, and I go, well, Steve, how are you going to make a difference? I don't know. I'm in my 20s or something. So I decided to make a big project and pick up trash on the street. Well, it was pretty good. And as we went along, I said, you know, we think you can do a little bit more than pick up trash on the street. So then I went in and I started to work with a company in rolling them in transformational courses. It was good. I said, Steve, we think you could do a little something more than that. And so I thought around. I thought, you know, I think I'm going to go in and do a training to become a suicide hotline counselor. Because when it comes to death, it can be very honoring. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on around it. And I'd been around a lot of death. I had, 25 aunts and uncles. They all died and so forth. So it wasn't a new thing for me. And I think death is a very honoring thing. So I did the training. There was about 90 of us that did the training, and 9 of us became counselors.
Oh, wow.
They were not really too sure about me because I had a little different language.
Right.
And normally when you're on a suicide hotline, you don't really get anyone who's going to commit suicide for several months. You get people who call in and they think about it. Women talk about suicide, but they usually don't do it. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get a lot of calls. People are depressed, but they're really not thinking about killing themselves. Well, I'll be darned if the very first week I got there, a woman had a gun to her head. And so I was on the phone with her for about 3 hours. And you have to be very careful what you're saying.
Right.
And you have to really be with them. And most people don't know how to be with anybody. And you have to really get what they're saying and get to the depth of the sadness and the grief that's going on. And you have to be very careful what you're saying because you can't be phony. You really have to be down in the trenches with them. And so they called the police. The police went to her door, and she did not commit suicide. So that was just right from the very start. But what happens is that I have no place to turn. I feel like suicide. I can't talk to my wife or husband. I can't. Nobody in my family I could talk to. I went to the church. It didn't work, even though it could be great. I've done everything. I went to college. Nobody's hearing anything I'm saying.
Right.
I'm in the world all by myself, and it's just not working for me. And that begins to become, when people kill themselves out of their paradigm. So they don't even know they're having a paradigm. Paradigm's just a worldview. And so they kill themselves. And if they understood that they were incredible, which most people don't, we don't teach that because people become too powerful. And this is about waking up the brilliance inside of you. When you get in touch with your brilliance, you're not going to waste time committing suicide. And, you know, most of it's about I'm a sinner and no good. Well, then you're probably going to commit suicide. So part of it is really being with people in times of tremendous need. And most people can't do that. You see, when somebody's committing suicide, you've got to sort of lose yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't really bring a lot of input. You're really with them. And most people can't be with anybody. So you can't really be a suicide hotline counselor if you're up in your head.
Right.
It's a good idea to have a very quiet head. And they get that you're really with them. So it was something that, you know, since I was, quote, successful, you know, What is success? Well, if somebody didn't commit suicide, that's a pretty great thing. And I've been with a lot of people who have thought about suicide, as the work I do as a life transformational practitioner, and we deal with suicide. And lots of people think about killing themselves. But once they discover that it's the illusion, it's not them, they kill themselves for who they were not. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know who you are, that's why I say it's vitally important. That's why we started out. You may kill yourself. You won't kill yourself. You're killing your identity. In the book, we're making a distinction between identity and a self. And if you don't have that distinction and you think you're your identity, which is this thing, you may kill yourself. But once you know that there's a whole other world, why you invent your purposes, you're so much on fire, you don't know what to do with yourself. And I've seen this almost 100% of the time. When you do paradigm work or transform your life, it actually has to work. It cannot not work. Because all you are is just creating a view of the world. Mm-hmm. So it has to work. It's not something like, I think it'll work. So this is very different than, oh, I think it'll be theory or nice. When you're looking down here and you know you're ugly, I promise you it has to work. And when you can let that go and you can create beauty. You know, I was in a Denny's restaurant, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and this young girl came up about 18 years of age, and she obviously was not good looking. She was maybe 250 pounds. She was quite, had acne, looking, quote, terrible. And the boys over there at the other table were making fun of her. And she wasn't affected by it at all. I said, they're making fun of you over there. She says, oh, I know. She says, I don't really care. I go, why not? She says, well, I know I'm beautiful. Mm-hmm. I said, do you realize that you're 150 pounds overweight and you have acne? Oh, she said, yes. And she says, I know I'm beautiful. I said, well, you're incredible. She knew she was beautiful. But if you think you are your 150 pounds and your acne, you may kill yourself.
Right.
That's not who you are. So that's a perfect example of, people committing suicide of that which they are not.
And everyone has that ability to really take a step back, realize that they're not that filter, that ugliness, that stupid or anything like that, and they're able to take that away. And I think that's one of the great things about the book and the work, and how you say it has to work, because once you realize that there's something there, you can now notice when it kind of comes back, and you just push it away. I don't want that, no more. That was the past. This isn't the present. So I think that's great. I think that's a fantastic story of the woman. I think that is kind of coming back into the culture and society right now, where people are owning who they are. They're not listening to what the magazines are telling them what is right, what is sexy, what is hot, or anything like that. You have people of all walks of life, all different looks and everything like that, owning who they are. And I think whoever does chooses to do the work, it just will amplify that confidence that everyone should have within themselves. So I think that's fantastic.
I'd like that to be the case, but if I didn't see the suicide rate going up, it's tragic. But when you say, well, now, very tricky what you said there. Now, how am I going to let go of something? What? How am I going to disappear something? What? How am I going to learn something? Well, you just said it. It's like you almost have to become the observer of your mind. Now, I know that sounds rather complex, but when you catch yourself doing your old purposes, which they go through here, you can go, oh, wait a minute, that's just my voice listening. So you begin to start to listen to the voice, and this is how you really invent yourself. Most of the time we're just on automatic, and it's just going here. So you just said something, you can catch yourself once you know your old purpose, like, oh, I'm doing that again. Now, once you do that, you get to the level of choice. Remember, I said before, the two words in the dictionary is, one is choice and constructs. We haven't talked about constructs. But in a sense, I'm at choice, and then you can let it go. Mm-hmm. That's the real key to life. And so you catch yourself, and you're going down this road, it's like, no. Sorry, I'm not buying that.
That's the power that we all have. But unfortunately, a lot of people get taught that they don't have it. And so I think that's what's so fantastic. And so personally, I'd like to say thank you, especially because you did your part of really putting yourself out there. You didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to go help out at the suicide hotline or talk to the girl, but you chose to. And so that's making the difference from just being brilliant within yourself, which is exactly who I am, and because I am you, kind of a thing. So I think that's fantastic.
And one thing you might just say is that this, however you define God, but let's just put it, God did not create any junk.
Right.
And our society put junk in your head. And fortunately, this woman, who was, quote, ugly, didn't buy it. So, and we've done that. And most people don't know what the heck happened to them. And the junk in their head, or if you want to call it just a paradigm, but we'll just call it junk in your head for a moment, is deadly. Because ultimately you are the voice, the what you create in language in your head. So that's why we're at the heart of the matter here. This is the ultimate, and the ultimate is your paradigm. And I have tried to take a look at my life, having done trainings for 40 years with every company you can think of, and none of them could do this. None of them could really get down to unlearning.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying this may be one of the greatest things ever written. And I realize it's like, wait a minute now, is he trying to brag? No, this is one of the greatest things ever written, because you'll find your own greatness. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say that, and I can afford to say that, and that is simply is until you get rid of those paradigms that you're viewing the world through, you will be a mess. And those reactive ones. You have to be, happens all the time. And so nobody's been able to really, they can describe it, but nobody's really been in a course where you actually do the work and let those things go.
Excellent. So you kind of touched on it, and I do want to ask this because I think it's such a huge question when doing these kind of works, that have you do an inquiry of yourself, which then allows you to kind of view the whole world differently. What does God mean to you? That term, or just what does God mean to you?
Well, I think it's a very important question. We here at Brilliance let you determine that for yourself. So we don't put in here what God is. We don't put in here any of that, because again, this is not about us telling you what to do. So we're very careful at Brilliant Institute for you to determine for yourself. Now, if I'm looking at it, what I find is that a lot of people say they really love God, but their paradigm is really running the show. I say I love God, but my real God is over here, that I'm ugly. You may say that, but that's what I'm thinking all day long. I'm ugly, but I say that I'm a Jehovah's Witness, or I say I'm a Mormon, or I say I'm a Muslim, or I say I'm a Hindu, or I'm a Christian, or I'm a, whatever the thing is. But the truth of it is, this is running my life. So we say this, but my real God is my paradigm. Mm-hmm. And because this is what's running me, and I hate myself. And it's a belief. And so my real belief in my real God is I'm ugly. So I say this, but this is my real belief. So how we empower and how I empower people is, if you can get rid of that, you begin to see something that is far expansive. And then if you're a Christian, it can be quite beautiful. Maybe you want to get to the church a lot. Maybe you don't. That's up to you. I go to church from time to time, and I enjoy it. But the main thing is that can you go to church without all of this stuff? Mm-hmm. So most of our gods are really our paradigm. And we claim this, but, here I am, a Muslim or Hindu or whatever, but I'm committing suicide or whatever those things are. So the force here, the emotions here, the meanings here become my God. Even though I say I'm this runs it. And I call them paradigmians. It's a word I made up, and that really my God is my paradigm. And so when you get rid of that or let that go, then you may want to get to the church a lot more.
Right.
Maybe you may want to sing in the choir. But probably, not too much going to go on here. So I would say that you're going to have to let go of those paradigms, those destructive paradigms, or you're really not going to get to a bigger picture. God is in all things. I mean, you just take one thing, and He created basically everything. So, otherwise this thing would float away.
Right.
So there's creation in everything we're doing. So, but we don't see that because of this.
Right.
So my spirit purpose, to maybe answer that, I am that we're part of the omniscient, omnipotent, abiding by the law of attraction in a constant state of vibrational frequency everywhere, every place, all the time. God is incredible. but we don't see it because our paradigm is here, even though we claim we're here. So once we get rid of this, then you discover you get a spiritual purpose. And so that's my spirit purpose. I am that we are part of the omniscient, omnipotent, abiding by the law of attraction in a constant state of vibrational frequency, everywhere, every place, all the time. So I do go to church from time to time, and it's marvelous. But we're very careful of not trying to tell people. We do find that people who are Christians usually become stronger Christians because they're not going to church with us any longer. And so they start to hear the music. Then they want to get into choir, you see. So if you're religious, you're probably going to get more so. If you're not, that's your business. Right. So we're very careful of not trying to put our paradigm in somebody's head.
You allow people to figure out what works best for them.
Absolutely.
And encourage their own love.
But we do strongly recommend you have a spirit purpose. Now,
Right.
whatever that looks like, and they can look very interesting and very different, but it's very, very important to understand the larger world out there. And but we feel that it should come from your gut. And so what we would ask is, what are your 10 most inspiring moments of your life? And then we create a purpose out of that. We start with I am that we are. And you begin to live out of those things that you experienced that got moved. And maybe it's when you got baptized and it was so incredible. Who knows? But then your spirit becomes experiential. See, a lot of the book is experiential. It's emotional. It's very important to have an emotional intelligence. And emotions actually are very connected to your thoughts. So the purposes are emotional. They move you. And you want spirit to move you. You want your body purpose to move you. You know, when you go to the gym and you're on purpose, you work out harder.
Right.
And you're not in some hopelessness. So all these purposes are to inspire you. They are to move you. And if they don't, then you better rewrite them. So they're not an intellectual thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So would you say that you are in favor of organized religions and what they do and how they can help people if they are used for the right reasons?
Absolutely. You know, religions have done a great deal for people. There's been a lot of people in need. And who's been there for them? Nobody. So it's crucial. It's just that you also want to make sure you're dealing with this.
Absolutely.
Because so that if you're dealing with this, you're probably not going to be free. And I believe that Christians that go to a church need to really be in touch with their love, be in touch with their experience. And you can't really go into a church knowing you're stupid or knowing that God hates you or whatever that thing is. This is going to create a lot of conflict in the church. So unlearn those paradigms. Then you may, there's no telling what you'll do. So you want people to come into the church free of their paradigms. Now we can do some brilliant work. Because when you opened this up, when we started and talking about it, there's too much we and they in the church. Okay. We're all one.
Right.
So if I've got separate, I'm not getting we and they. Because I'm actually better looking than you, or I got more money than you, or whatever. So what we want to be able to do in the church when we get there is that there's just a we. And there may be a little too much of separation. So probably want to get rid of that.
No, I completely agree. And I know personally, having gone to certain churches, Calvary Chapel was one of them. And I did some research on one of the speakers, or one of the priests, or the people that are up there, and they encouraged people that may be in a quote unquote bad place, if they're on drugs or drinking or any certain situation. Come to the church as you are. Come high. If that's what it takes for you to come, that's acceptance, as opposed to pushing and shunning people away, which I think is great. So I'm really happy that you said that. So I do want to ask, do you believe in any sort of afterlife, or what our energy does after you pass away?
Well, I don't think you can destroy energy. So my mother passed away in 1980. As far as I'm concerned, she's still here. And she's still teaching those lessons. You know, this is part of the thing about legacy, and we talk about this in this book, and we talk about writing your own eulogy. And, you know, really the only thing you leave behind is a difference you made in other people's lives. So, so you really could kind of say, well, did I really make any difference? And so I'd like to know what else your legacy is. So, I would say that whatever we're teaching now, and if it gets taught down, then that's the legacy we leave. So I'm not so sure, as odd as it may sound, that we really ever die. You know, when you look at quantum physics, it says that your body is basically 99% zero. So, you know, we think that we've got all this stuff and we're really important. But I think we are very strong, making a lot of noise on that thing. I think we're very strong energy forces.
Yeah.
So I would say that we probably continue on.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah.
think that's great. You touched upon how you feel like your mother is still here, which is it's true. You see a picture frame, it reminds you of a lesson that someone may have taught you from a grandparent or a cousin or anything like that. The lessons and the emotions are always there if you allow them to be.
So in that case, if Abraham Lincoln or my mother lived a certain conversation and I'm living it, maybe they did go.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, this is where we also get back to more of the we, and that is that if you can live the conversation that Abraham Lincoln did or Gandhi did, how's that any different than you?
Right.
So in a sense, then we're now connected to Abraham Lincoln and Gandhi and our mother. They may not be here in the physical form, but they are here in the spiritual form and in the communication form. So it kind of really creates a lot of intimacy with not only every physical object, not only every human being, but anything that ever existed in the past or present and the future, which is pretty great. And so you don't really have a sense of loss because you really can't really lose too much.
That's fantastic. That really is, and it's encouraging because so many people I feel do really like they fear death, they fear dying. You're losing loved ones, you're losing your possessions, you're losing yourself. When in fact we should just more or less embrace it. Or I feel like if we embrace it, there's less pain to worry about. You actually appreciate the beauty that comes with the time that's spent with your friends and family or a random stranger on the street. So I think that's great. I really do think that's fantastic, and it's one of those life questions that can't really be answered by anybody, you know. But it's just I wanted to kind of get an idea of what you really did.
Well, you may not be your body.
Right.
So then that changes that whole thing. But if I am this piece,
Mm-hmm.
quantum physics would say that you're not, then maybe we better be looking in a different direction.
Right. Cool. Thank you.
And that's how you become ageless. Because if you're not your body, then how old are you?
Well, how old do you feel?
Well, I feel two ages,
Okay.
really. 5 years old and 950.
Why 900? Why 950?
Well, it's about as high as I can count.
That's me.
I get exhausted when I get to 950, so I stop counting. I'll tell you the other thing is, if you don't get the joke of life, you'll probably never be serious. You begin to realize that everything in your head is an illusion. It's all made up. I know this is very difficult for a lot of people. When you get the joke of what's coming out of your mouth is made up. Nothing wrong with making something up. That's when you lighten up and you get the joke, and that's when you get dead serious. Because you cannot be serious when you're this. There's no serious person here. I trust you. They will fall apart.
Right.
But when you get, oh man, that's a joke. You know, come on, man. You know, and you get the joke, and it gets funny. Then you can get over here and you get dead serious. So if you don't really have a sense of humor, or if you don't get the joke, and you will get the joke out of reading this book, you will never be a serious person.
Well, I think it's great that you touched upon that. This is made up. The paradigm, the filters, everything like that. When in reality, all of this is again made up. It's created, you know, by who, whatever it doesn't. You know, but it was still created in some way, somehow. So in the same way how you're saying, we create these made up situations in our heads that end up holding us back when we could easily just laugh at them and get the
And you're
footage
not
of.
even trying to laugh at them.
No.
It's just like, what the blazes? I had a woman in the office, beautiful looking woman, and we were up on the board. She says, "You mean I've been doing that for 20 years?" Now, we're having this great conversation. She says, "You know what I mean? I've been doing that for 20 years, and I've wasted 20 years of my life." And she just started bawling her face off. She says, "All the love that I didn't give to people, all the times I could have been somewhere," and she just went, boom. So when you get that, yeah, it's a little bit of sadness, but on the other end of the sadness this is ridiculous.
Right.
So this is why I say, why would we go through this inquiry? Well, you go through this inquiry to get enlightened. Well, right now you might be in a state of endarkment. And you get enlightened because what happens is that you begin to have an ease. There's no stress in you any longer. So it's going to kill you. There's not this swimming upstream. So this is the easy road. And people say, well, it's 750 pages and it's, 160,000 words. And, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. Don't do the work and you'll see what happens.
Right.
Because this is exhausting. And we've really been trained to be sick. Very few people are dying from a natural death. So that you become cause of your life, not the effect of it. You're no longer a victim of life. This is having you be a cause of your life. And you'll find that you actually will have a miracle. And perhaps I already defined what a miracle is. I said that my life purposes, we are the one brilliant self. Life is transformed, creating miracles, transforming humanity. Now, what do you mean miracle? What do you mean by brilliance? People read that word and say, I'm not brilliant. And maybe you are. You're just not in touch with it. I'll repeat that a second time. Maybe you are brilliant and you're not in touch with it. So miracles, now, is that just something kind of nice? No. What happens is that if you come into a room, we are the one brilliant self, life is transformed, and so forth, something's going to happen in the room because you're not going to get derailed. And when somebody brings up, and by the way, you can actually get a lot more, I'm going to say tougher. I don't like that word, but because when you come into a room, you create the room.
Right.
And all of a sudden you get all these other things going on. You then don't speak that. And if somehow people look at you and they go, well, we just had this just the other day. Do you think we could sit down and talk? Because they could hear the miracles. Most people wouldn't do this. So I'll just give you a perfect example. I had an idea of the kind of woman I wanted in my life. I had 5 qualities, and I'll just mention what 2 of them, but I wanted a lady. Well, I'll tell you what they were. I wanted a lady. I wanted one that was good looking. I wanted one who was happy. I wanted one that didn't need me. And I wanted one that was intelligent. Okay, that's very nice. Very hard to get, by the way. It's pretty high standard. And I was on the road, traveling in my car, and some car in front of me stopped very abruptly. I stopped very abruptly. But the UPS driver decided not to and just slammed into me big time and into the car in front of me. And I had blood coming down my face, and I got out, and the woman in front who I got pushed into is my wife. What I'm saying to you is that we are so stupid that our paradigm doesn't see. There's something already happening out here. We can't even see it.
Yeah.
There's miracles going on, and so we can't see it. Now when this starts to get away like this, and you start to create your life, miracles start to happen. What do we mean by a miracle? It's something that you intended that happened effortlessly and naturally. And you say, well, how did this happen? I don't think you're going to go find your wife in a car accident. I don't think that's the real plan. So, and I've seen this where something really looks terrible and it was the greatest thing in the world. Because if you're coming from that purpose, it must happen. So that's a lesson in miracles. And you will get these miracles out here, and they will show up, not like some woo-woo miracles.
Right.
It's like somehow it happens. And therefore, you want to sort of tap into a whole universal intelligence or infinite intelligence, which is what Napoleon Hill was talking about, is that there is an infinite intelligence, but you aren't there.
Yeah.
You're still looking through this. And this is why every human being's beautiful, but I ain't ever going to get in touch with it.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. But, I mean, that's why it just takes that one step of doing the inquiry inside of yourself and that whole entire paradigm can go away, and it's a lot easier than it sounds. That's what's so fascinating. Um, Doing this work is not easy. I just said it was easy, but it does take a lot of effort. Um, Anything good is going to have a little bit of push and pull on a person, especially when you talk about taking away certain paradigms from yourself. So, in your book, you talk about making mastermind groups and mastermind partnerships. What are these, and why do you feel why do you feel these are so important?
Well, I think they're absolutely crucial. First off, I think life has a lot to do with relationships. So what we have is this is a book, we call it a transpedia. So a transpedia is a fancy word we made up. It's a transformational encyclopedia. Encyclopedia is a large work. Transformation means moving from reaction to creation. So we call it a transpedia. We don't really want to call it a book because it's not like any other book, because this is about unlearning. So how does the mastermind group help us to unlearn? So first off, what we do in a transpedia mastermind group, now there's many different types, is we get together. There's a partnership in a group. A group is more than 3, and a partnership is 2. So we have a mastermind group, and we read the first chapter. Okay, and there's those 3 questions, which I presented to you before. And you get together, we'll say either virtually or physically, and you get at the meeting. Perhaps you have 5 people there, 6 people there, and you begin by having a clearing, and we could discuss what that's later, but just kind of having a little chat for a little bit to kind of get everybody comfortable. And then you report on the chapter for 6 minutes, and you get 2-minute feedback. Now, I read the chapter, but I'm getting this feedback, and I missed a lot. Mm-hmm. And then the next person does it, and they get feedback, and the next person does that. So then you have a 6-minute reporting on it, 2-minute feedback. And you know that you're going to be there next month, so you know you've got to have read the chapter, mm-hmm. and you've written this all down. So everything you've got, you hand them what you got out of the chapter. It requires some depth there. Okay, you don't just get to read the chapter and so on, because you're accountable to the other person to do that. So now you have to give it a lot of thought. Now, then we get to the second part and that you then speak 2 minutes on the first question, 2 minutes on the second question, and 2 minutes on the third question. So in this case, question number 1 is, who are you? Question number 2 is, how has society determined you are? And question number 3 is, do you think you can be anything in your life, yes or no? So you're giving 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and 2 minutes. These are pretty interesting questions. But then you get feedback. Right. And the feedback's very important, because it's like, I don't really get that that's who you are. And so you go through, and each one does that. Now you can do what some do in addition to that. So that's the first phase, is reporting on the chapter. The second phase is reporting on the promises at the end of the book. We call them key points to ponder. And then the third phase is that you may make a promise in 5 areas: body, spirit, education, money, and relationship. And so you have an agreement in those 5 areas to do something that pushes you forward. So, for example, in the area of body, I may read a chapter in a book. The area of spirit, I may go to church. The area of relationship, I may call my aunt and uncle I haven't spoken to a long time. So something that will move those areas forward. And then you present your promises, whether you kept it or not, and then you have the one for next month. So this is very powerful, and this is what Napoleon Hill was talking about. He said all great people had mastermind groups. Mm-hmm. So that now all of a sudden you're speaking to somebody else about it. And it's really outrageously powerful. So this is what we call a transpedia. And then you go through each 26 chapters.
And are you currently in any sort of mastermind partnership or mastermind group where you're not not conducting it, but overlooking it? But are you actually present with another group or another partnership?
At the moment, of course, there's different. At the moment, not, but I have been almost all my life. I am in the process of getting this book complete, but I am in constant communication with people, and I am looking at a particular kind of mastermind group in which my intent is to reach 100 million people. So this is in the brew right now. But right at the present time, my main objective is to get this book complete, and that is quite a challenge. But I strongly believe in being one at all times. It's very rare for me not to be in one.
That's awesome. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
getting a book finished is a priority, and it takes a lot of the time. So for you personally, what do you feel the mastermind groups or partnerships have really helped? How have those helped you in your personal life?
Extreme. Because it forces you to do it. You don't get to stay up in your head and go, gee, something. You actually become it. And they can be gut-wrenching because if you didn't keep your promise, you got to report on that.
Right.
And you don't get to go unconscious. You actually have to be conscious. You have to come and report on that. So it has you actually become it or do it. And most of us are just thinking about it. So what happens is that you have phenomenal results. And when you make those promises, it's about pushing you out beyond where you normally would operate. So when you make those, you probably wouldn't have done it. You might not have read that chapter in that book. You might not have called that uncle. So you find all of a sudden things start happening in your life. It's like things are moving. It's like, I would have never done that.
Right.
And you're actually with your partner, you're telling them. So they know what you just said. And they might ask you, how come you didn't keep that promise? And one of the things that happens in a mastermind group, when you don't keep your promise, you get to take a look at what was in between you and not doing that. Mm-hmm. And what is your integrity? That's a thing we haven't really talked about. One of the things that we have, integrity in terms of speaking, which I'm saying basically that's all we are, you get to take a look at, does your word mean anything? And I'm suggesting that's all that you have. So it's going to be a little difficult to show up at the meeting and haven't kept your promises. Now you can, but then probably your partner's going to say, look, what's going on between you and not keeping this promise? So it's very, very, I strongly recommend no one be caught not being in a mastermind group. I think it's a major mistake. Because it is a call to action. And you will actually do it. You won't sit around and intellectualize about it.
No, that's fantastic. I know it's helped myself out, and I know it's helped Greg tremendously over the last 2 years of doing the work. Just being able to be there for one another, and obviously with the help of both you and Brad being at the meetings, it's nice to be able to do this work with somebody else, not go through it alone when we have questions or just concerns or anything like that. So it really has been beneficial for myself personally. So I do say thank you.
We get a lot of distractions in our life that never really have us make promises consistent with a higher self. There's all kinds of distractions going on, The neighbor's complaining, somebody doesn't like me, I got a new girlfriend, I got a new car. There's all this stuff that keeps me stuck. Most people really don't create anything new. The mastermind forces you to look in a different place. So most of us are what I call on Mazda mode. Mazda is a motor that just goes around. And, once we get 21, 22, 23, life's basically over. We never created anything new. The mastermind moves you. And your rear end is on fire. And you will start creating something new. It is really explosive. As opposed to, I just did the same thing. This book is designed for you to really invent any way that you want. Most people don't do that. They don't look at this kind of inquiry. And so they wind up dying, and they were never really here. They really never made any difference. Most people hate their job. We've got a divorce rate at 50, 60%. We've got, in our society, 50% of our society doesn't own anything. We're basically poor. We basically don't have any relationships. 92% of the people don't do any exercise. So it's not a pretty picture. If you look behind the scene, it's not a really pretty picture. Yeah. This forces you to, whatever you intended to do, to actually have it happen. So I strongly recommend mastermind groups.
It's very, very powerful. And obviously the benefits are seeing miracles happen in your life, usually daily. So I absolutely agree that they are fantastic, a fantastic thing to include in your life. I wanted to ask, because these mastermind groups do help people out in such profound ways, can you think of an experience in your life that was the most difficult for you? Like, what was one of the hardest things in your life to go through?
Well, one of the things that happened was, and it doesn't sound really difficult. Well, I'll go back really to my very first day of kindergarten. I was raised in the hills. I was raised with 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, well protected. And well taken care of, very well loved. And then I was dropped off at kindergarten. My mother just dropped me off. And I got into all these other kids. Well, I'd never been around a lot of other kids because I'd already been around adults. And they were acting like maniacs. And I was very afraid. Now, I always had my mother there, my brothers and sisters. I'm very secured. And nobody was there for me. Mm-hmm. This sounds rather simple, but it was very shocking. These kids were screaming and hollering. You didn't do it around my family or you'd get slapped upside the head. And you never acted this way. And it was very loud. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I'm 5 years old. I'm looking quite cute because I got my little bow tie on, very fancy. And they weren't all dressed like that. And this very loud school bell blared off in my head. And I was in total fear. And I started to make some decisions in then. And that is, I'm going to have to control people. Because we got to get control here or they're going to get me. And I definitely don't want to be like other people. This is all it takes is a moment in time in life. You know, you'd be surprised how this moment in time can create a whole paradigm.
And this is at 5 years old.
That's all it takes. It's 5 years old. You just need a moment in time.
Right.
So I became a control freak. And in addition to that, I also was very separate because I didn't want to be like that. And so those became 2 of the very paradigms. So I became very, very controlling and very, very separate. And so it created a certain barriers between people.
Right.
So he said, well, that doesn't sound like it's too traumatic. Well, it is traumatic. And so to get over that stuff took a lot to let that go. So I had 5 things to get rid of. One was positive thinking. You might say, well, that sounds good, but it's pretty dead. One was doing my little sensual number. It sounds simple, but it's not. One was doing my aristocratic number. 4 was getting rid of my authoritative number, and 5 was getting rid of my intellectual numbers. Now, they may not sound really heavy,
right?
But when you create these barriers between people, you're going to suffer. So the biggest thing was for me, even though they don't sound tragic, nobody got shot or anything else. But you don't really have to get shot. You see, this is what people think. They think they got to have a traumatic experience. Not necessarily. You can have an experience at 5 years of age, and it changes your whole life. We're looking for some event. You don't even necessarily have to have that, but you will come up with a paradigm. And if you're looking through positive thinking, it sounds good, it's not. And if you're looking through a sensual number or an authoritative number or an intellectual number or aristocratic number, you're going to be in trouble. It doesn't look bad, but now there's massive barriers. All day, all long, chatting in the head. It can make you sick. So the biggest challenge, even though it doesn't sound like that, is to let all that go. And how do you let that go? And so this is part of the work we're talking about, so that instead of there's a you and I, there's a we. So this has been a lot of work. But I would suggest you, if you don't do the work, you probably going to be in trouble.
No, it doesn't sound like it would a normal difficulty. How you say, like, some people would choose getting shot as like one of the most difficult times because it's very, very physical, but this comes from a place where it's internal and it can completely like you said, separate you from millions of people, but billions potentially. So yeah, and if you don't do the work, you're stuck.
You're stuck here.
Exactly.
But not only that you're stuck, you probably will be self-destructive.
Yeah.
It's much worse than stuck. Most people are at the level of stuck. You see, in the book we have 104 characteristics, long pain and suffering to love and humanity. And there's different levels. So we begin to take a look at that. And down here is stuck. Maybe, on a scale from 1 to 104, stuck is number 20. Self-destructive is down here at 10.
Yeah.
Long pain and suffering is down here. So we begin to really see is that there's different views of the world or different purposes of the world, and all you got to simply do with somebody is just see where they're at. Most people in our life, regardless of what their circumstances, are playing down here in the low transform levels. What are they? Boredom, fear, sadness, loss, I don't care, indifference, ego. This is what we've all been trained, and so we're a mess. And as you go up the scale, we have them in the book, well, you get up to maybe mild interest, or you get up to maybe something called integrity. Down here, you've been nothing but a liar and a deceiver. And so you begin to see the whole scale. And so we've taken 104 characteristics. It could be 1,000. And so you examine yourself on that. Where are you at? And most of where you're at is down here.
Right.
You're fearful. You're sad. You don't tell the truth. You're lonely. You've been rejected. And so you begin to realize, so the scale actually has you, and you can get to these states until you remove this. And so what happens is it pulls you out of these things, and then you're able to access those things. So this is really part of it. So when we look at a paradigm, well, we've got it layered out. It's 104 characteristics. So it's not like, oh, what's the paradigm? You begin to see where you could play, and then you begin to realize that first day of school created this. And when I mean controlling, I mean really controlling. So that, if I'd got out of college and been a drill sergeant, it would have been the worst in the world. But you see, it's just a behavior. Now, how's that going to work in relationships? It's not.
Right.
So I would say one of the biggest challenges is to be able to let all that go. And they were strong and they were heavy. And it looks like this, and I guess I'm going to do this for about 50 years. Well, guess what? You're going to be exhausted. And you will get sabotaged. And believe it or not, these things create car accidents. They create suicide. They create divorce. A paradigm will kill you. It looks simple, but until you see, you can actually look at somebody's paradigm and go, I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah.
And they're predictable. So, one of the things that somebody said, I don't usually use the word morality, but when you understand this, then you're almost forced to write the book. Because you begin to realize that God didn't create any junk, and that you can move up these scales, and you can do it authentically, and you can be it. And when you see people released from it, and they, if there was a right that they had a right to transform their life. What do we mean by transform? It simply means is that they have a right to be transformed. They have a right to be free. They have a right to experience love. They have a right to have a relationship. And it's like, I've asked many people, have you got any friends? No. Most people don't even, I've probably asked 250 people, do you know of anybody who has a relationship like you'd like to have? 175 said no. They don't see these relationships. Well, you can have a relationship if we can get rid of all of this stuff. There's no relationship here. You're not in a relationship with anyone, and you will get slammed. I promise you, it will kill you. It's that dangerous. So when you understand how dangerous it is, it's not just a matter of being stuck. It's not just a matter of being bored. It's not just a matter of being apathetic. You get self-destructive.
Yeah.
And this will cause you to eat 10 hamburgers a day, or it'll cause you to create constant conflict. It'll cause you to commit suicide. It'll cause you to damage other people. There are no accidents. This will determine. You may think it's an accident. No, I went down the road and I couldn't see what was going on, and I got in a car accident. And then on my death certificate, I died from a car accident. No, you died from this that caused the car accident.
Right.
So if you don't want to do the work, plan on having a terrible life. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but unless you're willing to remove this, which is usually very detrimental, your life will be a mess. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. You might get lucky and get through it. Very few people do.
That's fantastic. No,
Yeah.
That's great, and that's one of the challenges that it's universal that people face, that they have to take that off and get away from it.
But it doesn't belong to any particular person. You see,
No.
It isn't like, oh, this is mine. This is available to any human being.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of it, as opposed to, this is just a special kind. And it would be, if I hadn't written the book, then we're going to have a little special group This is available to the world.
Well, that's how you were saying it's people's right to be able to be transformed. It's not be able, that they should and potentially will. So I think that's great. You know, we have this, you know, all these rights and amendments and whatnot that give us the right, you know, bear arms, freedom of speech. But how many of us take that ability and acknowledge our right to transform ourselves
From the pain and suffering.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And we should probably have that as the Bill of Rights. You have a right to let go of all the stuff that's been downloaded on you that's killing you. So, yeah, so in a sense I'm going to say this. If you haven't created your purpose, your mate getting ready to get married, you may not want to marry him. In other words, in a relationship, you want to be able to determine from your gut how you're going to be with your mate. So you may not want to marry somebody until they read the book. I know this is maybe very odd. And you may not want to employ anybody until they, because they're going to come to the workplace with a lot of garbage. And they're going to come to the marriage with a lot of garbage. And you don't want it. So that I'm strongly recommend, if you're planning on getting married, make sure you read the book and do the work. If you're planning on hiring somebody on, make sure you do this. I would think every corporation would do this. If you're going to graduate from anything, you're going to have to read this. You're not reading this, you're reading this. This is about reading your own book within you. So you don't graduate from school if you haven't done this. You don't get married if you haven't done this. You don't go to work if you haven't done this, because you're gonna wind up suffering. So once this gets published, then you have no excuse for being unhappy. You have no excuse for creating a lot of consternation. You just simply didn't want to do the work. See, in order to get this could take you $200,000-$300,000. Nobody's going to go through all these courses I've done. This is $60, $100, whatever it is. But it's there.
Right.
So there's no excuse for being unhappy. There's no excuse for having non-possibilities, because you'll be loaded with your purposes. So if you don't want to do the work, you say, I can't afford it, or, you know, and I don't know how many psychologists understand this. And you can't afford $200 an hour for a psychologist, and so forth. So there's really no excuse any longer, because it has been written down. So if you're unhappy, read the book. If you are creating a lot of problems, read the book. If you are in apathy, read the book. If you don't want to read the book, then I would probably let a lot of those people go.
And I would add on, even if you are happy, still read the book.
Yeah.
Because it's going to do just as much good to someone that's already in a positive positive mindset. As you said, it pushes people to get to their higher selves even more. So if you can go to church even more. You know, if you love cooking, you're gonna cook, you know, your ass off. You're gonna be an amazing cook, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's great. But especially for the people that are going through turmoil and pain and suffering, it's definitely work that will benefit them, as long as there's truth behind every effort that they put in. So I think that's great. I'm gonna make sure that this is good. So I wanted to ask, do you have a favorite chapter in your Transpedia that for Steve specifically?
Well, you know, it's some of the chapters are emotional intelligence, obviously important. Self-expression is obviously important. Hypnotherapy is important. Playing the game of life is important. But I would have to say probably getting down to the basic is knowing what your life purpose is. Mm-hmm. So that I do like my spirit purpose quite a bit. But what happens is when I go into a room, I invent the room. And I know that may sound a little strange, but something magical occurs in the room. And so when I go into a room, we are the one brilliant self. Even if somebody's looking like a jerk, they don't get to be a jerk to me.
Right.
Because I don't buy their jerkness. This is very powerful. See, most people buy, oh, you're a jerk. I don't even buy it. So when I go into a room and somebody's complaining or they're nasty, they're probably going to bore me, because I know that that's a learned behavior and it's not who they are. So even though I'm getting some very nasty behavior, it's a complete illusion to me. So it doesn't have me powered. You know, somebody comes up and says, well, you know, I really don't like you and I hate you and you're terrible. Okay, I got that. It doesn't mean anything. As opposed to, oh, you know, so there's the opposing force and all. It just is not happening. So there's also that power is, you know, I got your reality. And is that the reality that you created, and do you want to stick with that reality? And so I oftentimes say that it's like, you know, that's your thought, great. How's it working for you? Okay, take a look at your face. And you're all pissed off and you're angry. So stick with that. Otherwise, get into an inquiry. If you don't, go with it. See what happens. You know, and I would say you're self-destructive. So when I go into a room, I don't really care what's happening there because I'm going to invent the people. And even if they don't operate that way, it won't make any difference to me. That's outrageously powerful. That's what I mean by when you say, well, I speak something into existence and it happens. So I've gone into situations that are tough. They're not tough for me. You can actually go into a room of massive opposing force, and it won't affect you at all. This is very powerful. And it's not going to affect you because you've already invented yourself, and it's authentic for yourself. And most people can't do it. They get sucked in. So I can go into a room, and I can go into where there's massive adversity. Bring it on. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist. That's what I mean how outrageously powerful this is. And I think if people just heard what I just said in that few moments, it's like, oh, wait a minute. So you're making a distinction. We're going to make a distinction between an identity and a self, or illusions in yourself. And most people buy people's illusions, and they get sick. I don't buy it. And that simply means is I got what you said, but I'm not living there.
Right.
And if you want to have a great relationship with a man or woman, do that. You invent your mate, and when they turn out to be a toad, doesn't mean a thing to you. And they hear that. They kind of get it's like, oh, you know, you're acting like a fool. Oh, I'm sorry. I just think you're wonderful. And it's not a positive thing or anything. It's like what you just said to me. I'm not even affected by it. And when you're not affected by it, they get over it because you're not giving it any power. This is outrageously powerful. So in a sense, if you want, and very few people, and that is when you go somewhere, you actually invent the whole thing. And very few people know anything about that. We haven't been told about that. You go to a place and invent it. So you're going to go to the Ritz-Carlton or you're going to go to the dump. Okay? How are you inventing the dump? And how are you inventing the Ritz-Carlton? And so the Ritz-Carlton's black tie. The dump is, you know, with all kinds of stench and so forth. So what? What are you creating? The environment no longer controls you. You invent, so I can have a good time at the dump. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can have a good time with black tie, but most people can't. So they got all these considerations, all the smell, and so it's like, okay, but I am my purpose at the dump. And if I get to a black tie thing, I really don't care. So what happens is you transcend the whole environment. This is outrageously powerful. So that there's no excuse for being unhappy any longer. There's no excuse for all of the conflict. Once you've done the work, the game is over. So all the misery and all the so forth and the years of counseling, I don't know the years of counseling are going to get close to this because I don't know that they understand this. Remember, this is something that after having done those courses for 40 years, I drew and working with clients for so long. So this didn't come out of some psych class. This didn't come out of something. This book was written right from scratch, and seeing people's lives actually have them work. So I'm very excited about it. It's been a long road writing this book. Trust me, it's been a long road. But I'm glad I did it. I never thought that it would take 6.5 years of this enormous, intense work. But I do know the power of it. And so I'm very excited to see that somebody could buy something for $60 or $50 or whatever it is, and sit down and read it. And maybe it's somebody in Florida who is in their house and they're lonely and they start reading this. Or maybe it's somebody in Spain. Or maybe it's somebody in upstate New York. And nobody was there for them. They read this and it's like, oh my God, everything in my head's made up. But I actually get it. And I just invented my purpose. And something happens. See, it's a little bit weird because it's like, well, what did I just do here? Well, I don't know what you did, but the world showed up differently. I read this book. It really, I didn't really understand anything necessarily. It didn't really describe me anything, but I got rid of something. And then it's kind of like, well, it's incredible. This is where you don't want a book telling you what to do. You don't need all that stuff for it. It's almost like when I got done with the chapter and I'm feeling a lot better, but what did I learn? You didn't learn a thing, you unlearned something. It's like, so well, what did I unlearn? So oftentimes it's difficult to explain. It's very easy to explain something you learned. I took a history class, I took a biology class. It's all finite stuff. But here, I lost something. And I'm not looking through that. So that's why it becomes a little bit more difficult to explain, because here you're getting to nothing. And it's like when you go to a university, you're getting something. Here you're getting nothing. I said, well, what do you mean nothing? I don't want nothing. Well, when you get to nothing, you get to everything. And so this is why it's very odd. Just like, well, the objective of the book is to get to nothing? Well, I don't want that. Well, what it really means is nothing in terms of those paradigms that are killing you. Doesn't mean you're still not a scientist. Mm-hmm. But so it's very difficult when you want to describe it, when you want to really say, well, what did I get out of the book? Well, you got nothing. I don't think I want nothing. Trust me, nothing will probably get you to everything. You'll get a lot smarter. What do you mean I'm going to get smarter when I get to nothing? This is what kept you stupid. So if you want to be this will keep you stupid and kill you. So when you get rid of this, it's like, you mean I got smarter? That's what's weird. It sounds strange because when you get to nothing, now you're like in real trouble. That's why that's a difficult thing to explain.
Well, because people associate nothing with having no physical possession, something to hold on to, something that they can have. But in reality, it's once you do let go and you have nothing inside, no mind chatter or anything like that, that's when you, as you say, you open yourself up for all the miracles and everything to come to you, because you're not attached to something, because you finally just have nothing.
Very powerful what you're saying, but very few people get there. We're going to put a stop to that. So that's a glorious place. Now what you just said, if people heard what you just said, is like, see, people can sort of hear this, even though they've never been taught this. They kind of know they're wonderful. They've experienced love, but yeah, there's no place to turn. There is now. And I know that sounds rather glorious, but there is a place now where you can actually turn to, not to go find another mentor, not to go find another Ted Kennedy, not to go find another Gandhi. Those are good folk. Not to go find another Abraham Lincoln. Go find it within yourself. And so therefore, I think this is what the founding fathers were trying to say is, okay, we have a right to have a gun, you have to have a right to religion, you have a right to jury of trial, you have a right to free speech. And I'm saying is that you have a right to be free from the noise of your head, which is basically going to run you. So I call those people paradigmians. And you have a right to be free from that. And so when you really look at real freedom, is it the right to carry my gun? Is it the right for me to have religion? Is it the right for me to have the jury of my trial? Is it the right for me to have free speech? Probably everything that's going to run it is your paradigm. So those guys established a paradigm. And so that's ultimately is, as I'm saying, you are basically a paradigm. And if you don't know what that is, I can promise you will be a mess. So that's what this is about. And this is why this is very unusual. And I really appreciate our interview today, because it's like, I don't know how we're going to explain nothing. Nothing will get you to everything. And so it's, and I think today, with your questioning and really appreciate it, I think today people will get that. And they'll go, I think maybe I ought to read that book. I don't like reading it, and I don't like to read. I haven't read a book in 10 years, but because all that stuff has just put me back into the same old stuff. But you mean I could disappear something, and I could improve my relationship with my wife or husband? I could have more abundance on different levels, making different decisions? Give me a copy of the book. And then we'll see. We'll know that the book works when the person who reads it tells me it works. But I've been doing this too long, so I already know. I've been doing this long, long time, for way too long, and I've never seen it not work. Not because the book works, because all you are is a paradigm. And when you transform that paradigm, plan on a completely different world. So this is a revolution. It is a huge revolution. And it's probably a revolution that you want to have.
Yeah, we definitely want to be a part of it. Absolutely. So kind of to get close to the end of this interview, we talked about our purposes. We just discussed your life purpose and how that was the most important chapter in the book for you. And there are 27 chapters, correct?
26.
26 chapters. And each one packs a huge punch of information that helps you out. And some of the chapters are the inquiry of your five purposes. So your money purpose, your relationship purpose, your education purpose, spirit purpose, and your body purpose. So if you can share with us, what are Steven Costales' life purposes?
Yep. Well, of course, my life purpose, I am that we are the one brilliant self. Life is transformed, creating miracles, transforming humanity. My spirit purpose is I am that we're omniscient, omnipotent, we're part of the omniscient, omnipotent, abiding by the law of attraction in a constant state of vibrational frequency everywhere, every place, all the time. I am, under circumstances, have incredible healing powers in which I am totally physically invigorated, and I cause living my life exemplary to Superman human qualities. I have that body purpose because Superman did some pretty incredible things, and you start to take yourself in a different place. Education is, under all circumstances, I am that I have massive transformational distinctions that leads to, and I cause enormous wisdom in the world. And my relationship purpose is something very similar to my own life purpose, and that really is that I create people as the one brilliant self, and I cause love and transforming humanity. And my money purpose is that I create abundance and financial independence. I have all my wants and needs are fulfilled, and I am able to use those financial resources to transform the world. So those are really my life purposes, and they do pull me. So when I think of my body, I think of Superman qualities. Then when I'm on the tennis court, that I may get very unreasonable. A lot of the work that we're doing here is unreasonable. They shouldn't happen in the ordinary sense of the thing. So that when you say I'm part of the omniscient and omnipotent, this is very unreasonable. You shouldn't be talking like that. So that when you start talking about, abundance and financial independence, these are not words that a lot of people use, but they pull you. And so when you make a decision, if it's not consistent with it, no, I don't think I'll do that. So your financial purpose should pull you consistent with financial independence or financial abundance. Your body purpose should pull you in Superman qualities. So, one of my friends said, well, he wanted to levitate. Okay. All right, well, that's a nice thing to say. And so I said to him, well, just for fun, I said to him, your body's 99% nothing. So you have to levitate whether you like it or not. So he's not thinking about levitation. So you might be surprised how you get there, but in the normal tunnel vision, you don't. And then it was already there anyway. So I do find myself on the tennis court from time to time hitting shots that I should never hit. And I'm not even looking at the ball. So we do have the power to do that. And you're hitting your ball out and it's coming at you, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour and you hit a winning shot. And it's like you didn't even see the ball.
Right.
So this is where you begin to tap into this energy that's everywhere. Well, you say, well, that's a little bit far out. Well, I'm pretty much like a cement rock in terms of reality. So that, but can we take those things and all of a sudden, maybe I didn't have to work 10 times as hard as that. I was meeting yesterday with a fellow who is demanding to see me, and he's probably worth about $10 million. And why is that happening? Well, he hears the abundance, so that you never know who's going to be with you. And so when you are clearing from this, because you're not going to create anything here, and when you get more to everything and nothing, which is available to anyone, then you can make an audacious statement to write a book like this, because my buddy said to me, if you can write this, you can about do anything. How did this all come into existence? How do we reach 100 million people? Well, we'll reach them when people get a sense of letting this go, and you can get to this particular place. So in this particular place, then you call the shots. But you're not going to do this over here. There's a lot of people talking about a lot of stuff out here. They'll never get anywhere because this is running the show. So when this starts to get away, all of a sudden, you're now in a clearing for this to happen. Most people don't deal with this. Well, you've seen people talk. It never happened because this is still around the show. You know, I think I'm going to lose some weight. Well, I know I'm ugly. Or, you know, I don't have any self-control. They can't do it. I'm going to lose weight, but I have no self-control. You can't do it. So that's why this becomes very much here. So when you say something incredible, it'll never happen. That's why lots of people are speaking lots of things and they never happen, because this is running the show.
Right.
When this steps aside, we don't know what you're going to create. So that's where, you know, a lot of people are talking about great stuff and everything else. They're talking about that you have a paradigm, but you never get rid of it. This is where you get rid of it. So that's the next step in this book, and that is, it's not just about talking about a paradigm, if anybody did that. It's not just talking about these things. But most people don't even do this, create something extraordinary. Most people don't even talk about describing a paradigm. They don't even know what that is. And I don't think any book is about letting it go. So we've really found the secret to life. It's not my secret. It simply means this is we've gotten to the heart of the matter. And very few people do not know what it is to undogmatize a paradigm and never read any book about it and do any work. So when I've been doing these courses for 40 years, I didn't have this book. Nowhere, anywhere, any place, any time. That doesn't mean there's not a lot of good books that describe it. Don't want to describe anything. Don't want to understand anything. Understanding and describing is totally different than disappearing. Mm-hmm. So when you disappear something, it's so incredible. So this is about disappearing. It's not about coming over and go, man, I had a great intellectual course and my professor gave me a test and I got an A, but I'm still here. I got an A grade, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Stop getting A grades. Stop getting millions of dollars. Stop, you know, being famous in Hollywood. It doesn't make any difference because you're still suffering. So the idea is to be able to complete something. Now, what kind of movie star am I going to be? Instead of killing myself. Now, what am I going to do with my money? Now, what kind of relationship am I going to? And you cannot do it. You will not do it. It is impossible when you're looking here. So this is about getting rid of that. And I don't think it exists anywhere, any place. And if it does, please let me know. And I've been doing an inquiry with so many companies. It's ridiculous looking for that. And I said, you know something? You're going to have to write the book yourself. And I said to one of my buddies who I knew a long time ago, I said, why am I writing this book? There's so many people done trainings, it doesn't make any sense. He says, Steve, you don't understand. You kept blowing up paradigms. You didn't sit around and understand it. You blew them up and 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 you blew. People aren't doing that. I had a hard time understanding that. He said, what you did is you've been getting rid of stuff. And people haven't been getting rid of stuff because they don't know where to turn. They couldn't get it from their family. Even though they loved the church, they couldn't get it. They couldn't get it here. They couldn't get it there. So they went around and nothing worked. It's like, oh man, get me on some marijuana. See, people have marijuana because they're sick of this. When you're here, you don't need the marijuana. When you're here and you're so tired out, you got to have about 10 beers. When you're here, you got to have lots of sex. When you got to be a workaholic because, you know, I don't want to come home. But when you're here, you're already drunk. You're already loaded with marijuana. you're already having the climax. This is why it's so extraordinary who we are. That's why we're all addicted, because I'm so tired of looking down this thing. If you could disappear this, which is what this is about, you're free. Now, it doesn't mean that my marijuana didn't help me for 2 hours, but I go right back to this. Mm-hmm. It didn't mean that my sex wasn't great, and I worked with a lot of people on sex, major problems, because it only lasted for about an hour.
Yeah.
All this stuff only lasted for an hour. When you do this, you're free for the rest of your life. No more barriers. No more swimming upstream. And so this is really a wonderful opportunity for anybody on the planet, because ultimately I am saying you are your paradigm, and you're looking through it, and you're inventing your life, and you're creating your life. And most people don't think they're creating their life. If you understand that you're really a creator, and you can get access to that, it's probably the most greatest thing in the world. And then something happens when I'm in the everything and nothing. And how did this come to my life? Well, that's because you weren't blocking it over here, like I did at my first day of school. Now I'm blocking a lot of stuff, and I'm going to really work hard. Okay, stressed out. So we've really found the secret to being able to access freedom and love, and it's not a joke. And I really appreciate this interview today, because if people get this, as they get this, they're going, I think I'm going to read this book. It's 750 pages. I heard this fellow Vincent say it wasn't necessarily easy, but something really, really rewarding. Give me a copy of it. And let's see what I can do to something. I've never heard about unlearning dogma or unlearning something, but I'm kind of getting a sense maybe that's the only thing I haven't done. I've done everything else, and it hadn't worked.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Steve. We really, really appreciate your time and all your honesty with each question. I know for myself, learning a bit more about you is and growing a friendship with you. Consider you family. So yes. It's been an absolute blessing knowing you the past couple of years, and being able to do this work along with your mentorship and with Greg. So I want to end it out. Is there anything that you would like to tell anyone watching? And any last words?
Well, I would say, Vincent, you're certainly a testimonial, not of the power of this book, but the power of you. And one of the things that people usually won't read this book unless they're really connected with love. And anybody who sees you knows that. How you got that way, I don't know. But I think it's what draws you to the book, and that simply meant, and also a sense of freedom, and a sense of that I could be something. Maybe you got that through your mother, I don't know. But you're not going to read this book if you really don't get a lot about love. And you're not going to really get this book if you really if you think you're really stuck. And even though you were stuck, you still tackled it. And so I'm really recommending that people tackle it. Bring it on. Take a look at it. It may be painful. Sure, there's going to be some tears shed, so forth. Probably that's good, particularly for men. So I really appreciate you having worked on you so that you are out in the world now. You're going to be around for the next 60, 70 years. Imagine what you can create when there's no longer any barriers. So this is very exciting. So to wrap it up, the intent is to get to 100 million people. The world does not have to look like it is. We've got a lot of wars going on. We've got a lot of enemies going on. It's unnecessary. And I understand why those wars exist. And usually, basically, when we're in a war, it's like, I don't like your thoughts and ideas, and we're separate. So this is a revolution. It is something that will work. And, I don't know. It may be that somebody comes along and drops down $1 million and said, look, buy 300,000 books and mail them out. something can happen just by a little, and I have a feeling that's what'll happen. Somebody's going to come out and say, here's $1 million. How much are they? $60 a piece. Get 300 books and mail them out to every governmental head, every large corporation, every school, period. And so even though it, it doesn't look like it could happen, it will. And I expect that, because once you take one person who gets this, and they're extremely wealthy, they're not going to let any of their employees come through a door until they've done this. They're just not going to, because they'll know that their employees are inefficient or incompetent. So I expect that to happen, and a lot of my expectations usually do happen. So I'm excited about the world, not just a beautiful human being such as Vincent, but somebody said it only takes one person to change the world, whatever that means. And so it's oftentimes doesn't look like you and I are it, but we are. So I certainly hope in this interview that people are not hearing any kind of arrogance. This is not about arrogance. This isn't about, some special group. This isn't about something that we own that you don't own. This is not the case at all. This is the farthest thing from arrogance. As a matter of fact, it's quite humbling, if you want to say that. And I'm excited about, we're here in 2019, what the world could look like on a political sense, on a religious sense, on a family sense. This revolutionizes all of it. And all you got to do is have one person in a family do that. Game is over. So I'm very excited about. Thank you for doing this interview, and I certainly think that it will lead to a lot of clarity to many people. I tend it will make a big difference in people's lives.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. Yeah, really, really appreciate it. Thank you to anyone that is watching and listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know this isn't the end for us, so
That's right.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.